get our kids to come on up. I actually did that to somebody just a few weeks ago, where they were teaching and we realized, oh, we didn't hit record, and so then Zoom changed it, and now they do this thing where it says this meeting's being recorded. So I pressed it while they were in the middle of their thing, and now
Hi, it's good
it went off.
to see you.
All right.
Hi, it's good to see you. Hi, it's good to see you. Hi, it's good to see you.
Do you remember?
It is so good to see you, Harvey, and
Celeste.
everyone. Wow.
These guys, they're shaving.
Amazing.
Love you and we miss you.
They're shaving.
So Michael's gonna go in the 5th grade next year.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, Harvey's gonna be in 3rd.
Wait, tell us Michael skipped 2 years.
And then the twins will be in kindergarten, believe it or not.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Our little baby.
Getting old.
Yeah. All right, guys. You can go back down.
Yeah, John Mojica's getting older.
Love you, Harvey.
One of the twins today literally climbed up one of the door frames in our house, and then put his hands against each side of the door frame and hung his feet, like hanging from the door frame.
Oh, wow.
It was Leo.
Like Spider-Man.
It was Leo, yes, exactly like Spider-Man. There's this part of me that I want to show you, but then I'm thinking this is going on YouTube. Great, like I don't know what's gonna happen to me, but I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, he's hanging there from the door frame. So anyway, so I share that just to say, they were babies, and some of you pushed them around in strollers and held them every meeting of the body, and they're not like that anymore. It is so good to be with you guys. It's interesting for us, like coming to this. I don't know about Ionela, but it almost feels to me a little bit like we're just coming to a family time or something like that. And honestly, it still doesn't feel that way with Metro yet. It's like there's so many people that, and when we moved here and we started to get to know Metro, and then the pandemic started, it's like we still don't know everybody well, but with meeting with you guys, we see new faces, but it's like, having been there for 4 years, we just feel like we're getting time with our family, and so I know we loved our time with you guys. Definitely miss all of you a lot, and are very grateful for the time that we were there. We feel like we learned a lot. I know Ionela always makes the comment about Northwest Indiana, saying that she feels like we grew up, like we became ministry adults or something like that while we were in Northwest Indiana. And my thing is like, I don't know, I don't really ever want to grow up, so don't put that on me. I think let's just I'll stay a ministry child for as long as possible. But did you want to?
Well, certainly you all are so special to our hearts, and anytime I talk about the Northwest Indiana Church, I say that's my family. And it really is something so special about the small church. And I left the small church for the big church. Metro is almost 400 people. So I don't know. I know maybe a few people's names, but I certainly miss coming to church and knowing everyone's name and knowing everyone's story and everyone knowing my story and really feeling so knit together. And whenever I think about Indiana, I think about how you helped us literally survive the first 3 years of our twins, being little babies, so many sisters cooking meals, helping me hold babies, cleaning my house. Oh my gosh. We couldn't have survived it without you guys. So you can call them your babies as long as you want to. They're still our babies, because literally it took the village to raise these babies. And so we miss you so much. And I will share this. When we were in transition to move to Metro, and we were having a really hard time finding housing, and the couple that were supposed to come with us didn't end up coming. I said, can we change our mind and stay in Indiana? But unfortunately, that was not an option. But I so miss being in Indiana so much. So we are so grateful to be with you guys tonight and share from the book of Proverbs.
At this point, this has been said to Metro, so I think it can be said, and I don't know how many of the details we shared with you guys at the time, but during that transition, we were back and forth about it. We decided, okay, yes, we'll go if this is what is being asked, and Chicago is saying this is like something that would be good for Chicago. We decided we would go. The couple that was going to come and lead Metro, that was the initial plan. We would be going with them to the ministry here in Metro. So that was the initial plan. And then everything worked out so that the Simmons could come to Northwest Indiana, right? That was kind of like how it was all going to, okay, the Simmons could now land in Northwest Indiana. We're going to go to Metro. Somewhere during that, the couple that was going to come ended up it didn't work out for them to join, for them to come. And so I remember having a breakfast time with one of the elders here saying, so what do we do now? Like, this wasn't the plan. This wasn't why we, moved out here. And they said, we don't know. We don't know what we're going to do, but it is what it is now. That's kind of and so it's interesting because if we've shared this, if we would have been asked, do you want to go lead Metro? I don't know what we would have said.
I don't know.
I don't know that we would have said yes, to be honest, a few years ago. And we felt great being in Northwest Indiana. It's almost, so now having stepped into this role of leading Metro, we almost are like, God, you have a sense of humor here. You just decided that you're just going to make it happen. And so anyway, but yes, we loved our time being there. I think we learned so much from Aaron and Julie, and are so grateful for the friendship that they gave to us and things that they taught us while in Northwest Indiana. So many of you, things that we learned from you. I know we could go on and on. Maybe you're like, just get to the lesson. But anyway, it's great to be with you and see your faces. We love you guys very much. We are going to talk about humility. It's my understanding you guys have been looking at Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, and we're going to talk about humility from the book of Proverbs. I think there's a lot in Proverbs, some great things, and some of the first things that I think of when I think of Proverbs, like the first word that comes to mind is wisdom. I would say that many of us might say the same thing. Like, that's the first word that comes to mind. It's interesting. Humility to me is a really difficult thing to define. And actually, I looked up definitions, and all of them were unsatisfying, to be honest with you. I don't know if that's weird. I don't know. That might actually be prideful. I don't know. To say I'm not happy with the definitions that are given. But all of them, here was some of the general gist of some of the definitions. Most of them said something along the lines of the opposite of pride, which I was just like, that doesn't really tell me much. I'm trying to, okay, humility is the opposite of pride. Okay, great. Now what do I do with that? How do I make sense of that? So that was one thing. Another thing that I found that was common was thinking of oneself lower, like how you view yourself, thinking about yourself in a lower way, and then in a lowly way. And I thought about that, and that was somewhat unsatisfying to me too, because one of the things I thought about is I'm telling Ionela as we're discussing this, what if you think of yourself here and I think of myself here? Then okay, then we think about ourselves lower or something. At what point, isn't there relative, right? Isn't there a point where we're like, well, but what is humility then? What does it actually mean to be humble? Because if one person's thinking about themselves here, but they think about themselves a little bit lower, compared to what? What do you compare it to? And so, anyway, looking at all of this, I was just thinking it's interesting to consider, this topic of humility and what does it mean for someone to be humble? What's funny about the idea of pride to me is that we're all very, very good at spotting pride, really quickly in others, right? Oh, Lily, we have one of the campus students from Metro, by the way, on there. She's waving hi right now. This is Lily.
Hi, Lily.
Hi, Lily.
Hello, friends.
You directly messaged us, Lily, just so you know.
But Lily is with us in Metro. It's good to have her with us here. This is the Northwest Indiana Church, Lily.
I hear bomb things about you guys, so I'm excited.
But this idea of pride, it's funny to me because we're quick to find it and point it out in others, but isn't it like almost impossible to find in yourself? Like because by nature it hides itself, right? It's almost like when you're actually prideful, you're actually kind of are not able to see it clearly, and it actually some of what pride does is it actually kind of it like influences it, it changes it, like it messes the waters, right? So that you almost can't see things clearly. And so anyway, so giving a definition is kind of difficult. What are we talking about? You know, one thing I will say about humility, something I've thought about for a while with the topic of humility, is that it's there's something about it that is like a sobering view of yourself, right? Like, meaning, because when you think about sobriety, viewing yourself soberly is it's not necessarily just viewing yourself, you know, as bad, because meaning, how low can you go? I mean, at what point is it to the point where now you're just despising yourself? And that's what humility is. So that doesn't seem to fit, right? But this idea of sobriety in how you see yourself, it's sort of like you see yourself clearly, right? There's clarity in this. When I look at myself, I see this is who I am. And I see my strengths and I see my weaknesses, but I'm able to be real about who I am. And it seems to be something that there's something in there that's humble, right? Because it's not just putting yourself down. It's not saying I'm bad in this way or that way, but it's being real about who we are, right? And so we're going to read here in Proverbs Chapter 1. Ionela, can you actually read 1? Mm-hmm. We're going to read Proverbs Chapter 1, verse 1 through 7. This is, so, you know, picture, this is almost like the introduction to this. And we gain some perspective from Solomon here in regards to what he's writing for. Like, what's the point? What is he actually going to be saying in these sayings? And so we're going to read 1 through 7.
The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance, for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction.
Okay, so the book of Proverbs opens with kind of an explanation of what are you going to hear as you read this book, as you read these things. What are you going to gain from it? And it explains a little bit, right? And it talks about a couple things. And I would say that there's two things that we're going to share that I think are, these two things are common thoughts when it comes to the book of Proverbs, common things to consider. And number one is wisdom, right? And we think about this idea of wisdom. Wisdom being something that Solomon, the writer of these Proverbs, sees as being of the greatest of values. And how do we know that? Well, we know that because, and you guys have probably heard this, right? In 2 Chronicles 1, what happens is God says, ask me for anything. And what does he ask for? Wisdom. Right? He wants wisdom. And I don't know about you, but I would bet that most of us, that wouldn't be what we would ask. You know, I would assume that most of us could think of a few things that we might, you know, like, can I get two? Can I get, like, you know, this and wisdom? Or, you know, I don't know. But I think that, you know, what we see is he sees it. If you could have anything in the world, you know, you could have access to that. I would say that you would view that thing as of the highest value. The highest value, the most important thing, and what it is that he sees as wisdom. And so Solomon is given wisdom. Then he goes on to display wisdom, like in his actions. As you read about Solomon, you see some of the things he does and some of the things he says. Then he goes on to teach and pass on great wisdom to us and to those that heard him, right? Another thing is we gain from this at the very end of these verses, we see this idea that like it's almost like the first thing. Like if Solomon's saying, this is what I'm going to tell you about. This is what you're going to gain from all these sayings. Oh, and by the way, the very like first thing we gain is this idea that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It's like if the very first thing. Okay, so I think another thing that we see a lot of in the book of Proverbs is the fear of the Lord. And the understanding that like the beginning of wisdom starts with an understanding. I think part of how I see the fear of the Lord is an understanding of who God is and an understanding of who I am.
Yeah.
It's almost like being able to process that clearly. Like I know who God is and I know who I am. And having clarity about those two, it seems to be extremely important, right? To be able to understand. And if I know who I am and then I know who God is, then it sure seems to make a lot of sense to have fear, right? And this fear to be an understanding of and fear is something that when you think, I don't know about you, but when I think about fear, it's like people live in fear all the time. People make tons of decisions based on fear. People do things on every day with fear in their minds, in their hearts. They're afraid of what others think of them, so they act in certain ways. They are concerned about, maybe what life might be like if they don't have more or have access to this or have, more than others around them. And so then what they do is they seek more and more and more. And some of it's driven by fear. Mm-hmm. And so it says here that the fear is the beginning of knowledge. So what's interesting to me though about all this is what starts all this? Like where do you gain something like wisdom, and where do you gain something like the fear of the Lord? And so we're going to look at two passages. Proverbs chapter 22, we're going to start. These two verses to me, I think, and we're talking about humility, so you might know where we're going with this, okay? But I think when it comes down to it, this idea of both of these concepts, wisdom and the fear of the Lord, I think much of what initiates that is a sobriety about how we see ourselves and who we are, and being able to see ourselves clearly. So Proverbs chapter 22, verse 4, it says, humility is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches and honor and life. It equates the idea of humility and the fear of the Lord here. We see this connection between humility and the fear of the Lord. Fear of the Lord necessitates humility. Like if you're not humble, you really can't look at God and have clear fear of God. Mm-hmm. If there's not humility in your heart, like if that's not who you are, then you won't see God clearly and you won't see yourself clearly. And so what we see in this passage is this idea of humility is the fear of the Lord. And we see the blessings from this passage as well, right? It's wages. What do you earn? When you have humility, what do you earn? Riches, honor, and life. Mm-hmm. Right? And so obviously then we look at this and we say we should seek after humility, right? Humility should be something we pursue and we go after. We look at it as something great to gain. Oftentimes though, it's interesting how in our nature, and I would say part of this comes from the world, right? It's like just what we see in the world around us and how we're influenced by those around us. Humility seems actually like if I'm humble, then I might be walked on. Mm. If I'm humble, then I might not be respected. I might not be looked to. People might not think I know anything. And I see this. I see this in myself in different ways, and I see this in many specific areas. I see it in others, and I see it in myself. There is this desire at times to prove yourself. Mm. there is this desire sometimes to let people know what you know. There's this desire sometimes to look a certain way, right? And what we see here is that this idea of humility and the fear of the Lord. Then we jump ahead to this other verse, Proverbs chapter 11. Proverbs 11 in verse 2. Proverbs 11 verse 2 says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. So humility precedes wisdom. I mean, this idea that when to gain wisdom, there has to be this understanding of yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And humility. There has to be this ability to see yourself clearly, right? And so in all of our pursuit towards wisdom, and I think about anyone that becomes a disciple, you're not a disciple for long before you start saying, I want to mature as a disciple. I want to grow as a disciple. I want to, know more about God and seek God deeper. And I want to mature and I want to grow and I want to be wise, and we look maybe to someone that's, when you're a young Christian, you look to someone that's been a disciple for 30 years and you go, they know the scriptures, they know how to respond in situations. They seem like, these different areas of their life, they kind of have figured out spiritually, and we all have this ambition more and more towards wisdom. Well, without humility, you're not going to get there.
Right.
You're just not going to get there without humility. And so these two almost like big themes, wisdom and the fear of the Lord, almost seem to be that without that you need humility in order to gain these things. Did you want to share anything before we dive into?
No.
Okay. So a couple things. We want to hit like a couple things that are a little bit more practical as we continue here. I think that this is so important because, I look at, there's so many reasons and there's so many things in the world today that we see that humility isn't the first choice. And it's probably always been this way, by the way. It's not like just right now. I think this has always been the case. Humility is not typically people's first choice. So we want to share for a moment here about this idea of that God reveals our pride and self-reliance in various ways. As a disciple, God will continue to reveal these things to you. The question sometimes is, are we listening, right? Are we paying attention? I think about when we moved to Northwest Indiana. When we moved to Northwest Indiana, I think we did grow up a lot. Like, I think we learned a lot in Northwest Indiana. There were a lot of things that we were able to learn just from being in the church there. And up until that point, we had done campus ministry. In its nature, campus ministry is kind of black and white in nature, in the sense that, like, you just see it's just what it is. There's truth and then there's the opposite, right? And so the mindset can kind of just be just one way. And so as we moved in Northwest Indiana, started working with married couples and people with kids and families and these different things. And we started understanding the dynamics of what it looks like to lead a church. What is all that like? You can't help but to be in that situation and start to see there's some needing for growth and humility, and there's some needing to understand some things about who I am and who God is and my need for God, right? And so there was different times and moments in different ways in Northwest Indiana where I saw this, and then it continues, right? Then we moved to Metro, and I know for myself, moving to Metro, getting to know new people, different people, a different dynamic, church with a lot more people, which just by the fact that it's people, that means more needs, more challenges, more everything, and then as we've been transitioning into this time of us leading it and leading Metro, it's interesting for myself. I think I felt that I had grown. I felt that I had grown to understand ministry in many ways. And I felt that I had grown to be relying on God and trusting that, I don't have to have all the answers. But it was interesting because as we transitioned into, we did like a number of months of co-leading with the Goches, and now we're officially like leading Metro. But during that time of co-leading Metro, I, for the first time, started like struggling with some things that I had never before. I started struggling with some anxiety in ways that I just hadn't wrestled with before. I started struggling with, I had a few moments where at first I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe there was something physically wrong with me. It turned out it was like panic attacks. And I was freaked out by it. What is happening? Like, why, you know, and so much of what I'm seeing as I continue is an understanding of my level of stress, my, you know, but part of this is an understanding of my own, how do I process maybe challenges in my life or different things? Am I self-reliant, or do I rely on God? And so it's interesting, God puts us in situations and lets us have to wrestle with this question, right? Will I rely on God? And I think all of this points to the question of humility, right? Will I be humble enough with God to let God lead, to understand that God is the one in control and that I am not, that I can't do things on my own, that I'm going to need God in every area of my life. And so, you know, I was going to share.
Yeah. Well, first about, you know, pride. I think humility, as we all know, as human beings, it does not come natural to us. I have not met one human so far that says, oh, humility is easy for me. It's actually something that is not natural for us, and pride is natural for us because we are sinful by nature. And we see it from a young age. And, you know, I most likely believe I was very prideful as a child because I see it as an adult, but I see it in my children. And one child in particular, that's little Angelo, believe it or not, he believes—
The smallest one.
The smallest one, he believes he knows everything. And he doesn't need us. He's very independent. I can do it. And it's very evident he's not able to do it. But him and I went on a little date, and we are driving in the car back home, and I, you know, encouraging him, Angelo, you are so smart. You are so brave. Yeah, and he says, I know. And then he says, Mom, I know everything. And I'm like, uh-oh. Oh my gosh, you are 4 years old, child. What do you mean you know everything? But that is so true to the human nature, right? That from a young age, actually the Bible says that we are inclined from youth to sin. And so humility is something that we have to be very intentional in our pursuit of it. It doesn't come natural for us. And so when I thought about, you know, self-reliance, absolutely, this is something that I, from a young age, I think I was forced to be self-reliant in a lot of ways because of parental neglect. And I'm the oldest of my family. So self-reliance honestly became a way to survive and be able to function. And becoming a disciple at age 16, I had to see that self-reliance was so much rooted in pride. And that when I didn't go to God with the things that I was battling, I was looking within myself for the help that only God could give it to me. And then, you know, you become a parent, and that really teaches you that, boy, you need a lot of help to raise these children. And God has revealed it to me so much more, having little twin babies when I had a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old already, that at that point I felt like I could manage. I can handle it. And then they came and I was like, I cannot handle it. And that's where really I feel like I learned to rely on God and my sisters, because I'm not one that likes to ask for help. I see it as a sign of weakness. And I think that is the world in general. I think when we think of self-reliance, we think as something good, that I'm independent. From a young age, we're being taught to be independent. You can do it. And so we have to learn to be dependent on God. But I feel like moving to Metro, it's really stretched me. I've had growing pains as a disciple, as a minister, leaving the small church to coming to the city ministry. It's been quite a transition for me, maybe more than Anthony, I don't know. But I really felt like I had some minister crisis, like, am I doing what God wants me to do? Why am I here? And really in those moments of questioning, what I realized is, yet again, I'm looking within myself. I'm looking towards me. Do I have what it takes? Instead of, well, God led me here. It's very evident. I see God's hand at work. And then with us stepping into this new role, again, I was wrestling. I don't know if this is us. I don't know if this is what God wants us to do. And yet again, I was faced with yours focusing on yourself, Ionela, not God. And I think this is just what I've realized is to pursue humility is something that I have to do for the rest of my life. It's not, I've been a disciple 20 years. I've not figured it out. It's something that I have to fight for and remain in the word, in the scriptures, in conversations with other sisters that can see my pride and point out my pride and help me in this journey.
Amen. Well, so there's few questions to consider, just like reflective questions to consider with this idea of self-reliance. What ways are you self-reliant? Do you seek help and discipling from others? This is one that, like, I feel like we ask this constantly, but it's almost like, yes, we ask it constantly. It should be something that we consistently ask, you know. Do you take time to self-reflect and seek to understand your pride? You know, I almost think sometimes we have to like just stop and process, you know, and ask and think and look, you know, even asking God, I want to know, I want to see it, you know, and I want to see these areas where I've been self-reliant and, you know, I've not been humble and trusting you as opposed to myself. So can you think of ways that God has been trying to reveal your pride? Because I do think God just kind of keeps prodding. He just lets us know. He keeps pointing us in directions. You know, it's interesting. I've oftentimes when I've talked to people, it's interesting when you talk to someone that shares something along the lines of like, you know, they have problems with many people, like they kind of constantly have problems with everybody around them. You know, you go, maybe there's something to learn in that, you know, maybe you're learning something from this idea that, you know, that maybe there's like some things you can work on and grow in. Maybe it's not everyone else, you know. And I think that God is constantly looking to reveal things to us. And are you looking for these things? Second thought that we wanted to share, other than this idea of God reveals pride and self-reliance to us, is humility is self-reflective, and pride is others reflective. And here's what I mean. Okay, humility. This is kind of like how we handle things when we're seeking humility. Is that we look at situations that we get ourselves into, or that interactions that we have with others, and we kind of go, okay, how can I respond better? How can I handle the situation? What ways can I grow? What do I need to learn from this? And these are the types of questions we ask. And I think, but sometimes what we do is, if we're prideful, we might go, what ways do they need to do things differently? What ways do they need to respond differently? How can they grow? How can they change? How can they, right? And it's others. Others need to be the ones that change. With the chaos of the last year, we don't have to look far. We just look out in our society and out in, or how about this? Just do this really simple thing that you shouldn't do, but do it. Go on social media, just you don't have to go far. You just look on something. What you see very quickly is, let me ask, what do you see? Do you see people being self-reflective and humble, or do you see people being others reflective and prideful? I think that's I don't know about you. What I see is within our society, this natural desire just almost to find the fault in everyone around. And I have to say, making this point that I'm making right now can be exactly what I'm saying. Meaning, because I'm pointing out at the rest of the world saying they're doing this. Unless we take this thought and then we go, okay, do I do this? Right? It's not prideful if we go, that's right, a lot of other people do this. What about me? How do I respond? How have I responded to the hot topics of the world, of the things that so many people disagree about? How do I respond? Do I look at myself and do I ask? Do I say, okay, how should I respond? What's the right way to respond? Do I ask, where's my heart in this? God, how do you want me to handle this situation? Do I ask questions of myself? Am I self-reflective? I think typically this will point more and more us towards humility. Mm-hmm. And so, some different things. How about you? Are you self-reflective, or are you others reflective? Do you look around at the world around you and find fault? Or are you quicker to say, okay, what about me? In your relationships within the church, within your families, the people that you interact with, what is it like? Are you quick to find fault in others? Right now, if you think about some of the people you're the closest to, can you point out their flaws right now? Can you point out yours as quickly? Is it easy just to say, no, I see the areas I need to grow in? And I don't think self-reflection and humility has to be beating ourselves up, by the way. I think it's just honest, just real. It's just being able to see myself for who I am. And so I think with all of this, what we would say, is humility works. Mm-hmm. It's interesting how many interactions, I've been in where I might want to respond one way. And what I find is that if I take a deep breath and I choose to respond with humility, and sometimes that might even be direct. It might be honest, it might be straightforward, but it's still humble in how I communicate. It's awareness of myself and my own weaknesses, my own flaws. It's not pointing the finger. It's an understanding that, I want to understand this person. I find that it works on a consistent basis. And I also think it's interesting to consider this idea of if we're able to take a step back and be humble with God, and be reliant on God, what kind of things might this produce in us? Mm-hmm. And I think what we see from the scriptures is we see that where it leads us to is wisdom, and it leads us to fear of God. Mm-hmm. I was going to share now.
Yeah, I really love how God is so quick to answer those prayers of God, reveal my sin to me. Because I think what God desires is for us to be transformed into his image, that we become more and more like him each day and less like our sinful selves. And a psalm that I have prayed before, and be careful what you pray for, as they say, right? Is Psalm 139, verse 23 and 24 is the last two verses. And it's a prayer asking God to reveal pride within us. And search me, O God, he starts, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. And I think that sometimes can be a very scary prayer to pray. God, show me, expose me. It's very scary to be exposed, but yet that's how growth happens, is to be exposed, is to see yourself clearly. And I think self-awareness truly is the first step towards growth. If you are not self-aware, how are you going to grow? Because you don't know what you need to grow in. And I remember in our first ministry experience, I was really struggling. I was struggling and doubting whether this was my calling, if I needed to do ministry, because it was challenging. And I just prayed, God, if it's me, if I'm the problem, just expose me, show me where I need to grow. Because I was so focused on the campus sister and what they needed to grow in, that I'm like, I think there may be something with me. And so I prayed that prayer, and no joke, less than 24 hours later, a sister comes to me and says, hey, I need to talk to you. You're like, oh, great. I prayed that prayer. Now be humble and listen. And she confessed that she feels like I wasn't, with my words, I wasn't very gentle in the way I spoke. And I wanted everything inside of me. You know how you feel your pride just wants to like that lion just attack and take over to defend yourself because you feel threatened. And I just remember I prayed, and God is answering my prayer. I need to be humble in this moment, and I need to embrace this, because this is how I'm going to grow. And it took about 9 months of me really consciously working on my gentleness, until a sister who we were difficult, we were having a hard time getting along, she came to me and said, I just wanted to tell you, I feel like you've grown a lot in your gentleness. And I was like, what? And I think that to me was, wow, God was showing me, you have listened, you have prayed the prayer, I have revealed it to you, and you've been diligent in trying to figure it out and be humble in your repentance. And here's the fruit of it. And so I think that to share that God desires humility, so God is going to give us the opportunities we need to grow. But are we going to be open to them or resistant to it, which our pride causes us to be resistant. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be with all of you, and thank you so much. As we said before, we love you guys very much and are grateful for for our time with you. Aaron, are we kicking it back to you?